So, Jow,
Yes, sir.
I've been thinking, since you had sort of presented the challenge of coming up with a topic, right, for the Thanksgiving holidays,
Mm-hmm.
which is typically of the holidays, I'd say is probably one of the more challenging ones to be thematic about.
Sure. There's not a
At
lot of
times.
Thanksgiving movies for that very reason.
Yeah, not so much. Not without having to dip into, I don't know, a history lesson about the Pilgrims or some shit. But
Or being absolutely obvious. Like there's a
Yes.
there's a subtlety required for a good storytelling, and Thanksgiving is pretty on the nose.
yeah, I'd say so. So I was thinking to commemorate the holiday week, what if we talk about the things that we take for granted as artists?
Hmm.
So perhaps things like equipment, what are like some equipment we might use all the time that we don't really think about, like, oh, if this was just gone, what would I do?
Yeah.
Skills, like skills that we might use as artists that we really take for granted that, no matter, like, even like low level stuff, right?
Mm.
Things like so I'll start off with like an example, right? Like just being able to draw like a box. That is actually like a three-dimensional box, right?
Well, a lot
Like,
of people
that
know
is-
how to do that. They check the sides of a notebook in anybody's English class.
And we take that for granted though, because that's actually like a major building block for drawing.
Yeah.
Because it's about learning how to draw perspective. And you build from that. You build from those basics and those fundamentals. And from there you can do everything, basically. Something that I've been thinking about in regards to so like in regards to last week's episode when we were talking about some of our favorite artists, right? I picked up Sean Gordon Murphy's Batman White Knight. And something I was really noticing is he has an impeccable talent for using perspective to like in ways that I never really thought about using it. So like in other words, like he's using it in ways of composing the page to create rhythm, to create like a sense of how the eye moves left to right in reading the page. And it gave me kind of pause to think about, okay, well, so like what am I taking for granted in the sense of like how I'm thinking about perspective in a shot, or how I'm thinking about how I draw three-dimensional objects, things in the environment, it's something that comes up actually a lot in drawing comics. And this was something that was like hammered into me in art school, which was that you really need to use environments to their fullest potential. And I've harped on this before in this podcast, but I have noticed like there are a lot of artists who try and like not use backgrounds so much and focus on a lot of close-ups, a lot of like get the action of like what's going on with just the character. And there's a lot that gets lost. There's a lot that I think that gets taken for granted in regards to, when you're building your world, when you're building your environment. And so I think oftentimes what happens is that artists kind of get weirded out, or they get maybe frustrated or even intimidated by the idea of like having to draw something in perspective. You don't have to be that good at drawing something perfectly three-dimensional, whatever.
Yeah.
You just have to have like enough of an understanding of like, okay, there's a horizon line. You have vanishing points go off to the horizon line. It doesn't have to be, Leonardo da Vinci, but you need to know at least that basic understanding. So I know for me, like I'm realizing I'm kind of taking that for granted a little bit, and I'm taking for granted the way that I'm composing shots too. There are ways that I can compose shots that like I've never even considered. Like the idea hasn't even passed my mind. And so that gives me a little bit of room to think about, okay, well, here's where I could grow. and going into the future as. So what about for you, Joe? Can you think of, we'll start with skills. Are there any skills for you that you feel like you might be taking for granted as a storyteller or even in film?
It's something that I never thought about until I was praised for it. And when I say praised for it, I don't mean in like my mom says, oh, this is really good. I mean like several different people who don't know each other, who have all interacted with my work in some way, shape, or form, have all come back with the same comment, and it was unprompted. Like I wasn't asking, what are my strengths? Did you notice anything stand out? Like I didn't ask that. Like they were compelled to tell me. And that was when it really started jumping out at me, is I have an innate skill, I guess I could say. I hesitate to call it a talent. For natural dialogue that seems to be very pointed towards the thematic premise or moving the plot along or revealing character. Somehow, some way, my brain works in a way where I can write the dialogue knowing what I'm doing, like I'm gear shifting, not even thinking about it. It's like it's just an impulse. It's like, oh, I have to use this word. Oh, I'm redundant here. I'm using these two words, but this word will mean that, and that will convey that. And if I have an eyebrow raised here, like I'm already like reading the dialogue and then picturing how it's being executed.
Yeah.
And somehow I am conveying plot points forward, character revelation. You know what I mean? But I'm got it in that subtext level where it doesn't sound, where it's not hard for an actor to read, where it's not, distracting the audience or anything like that. So many people have read my scripts, not even watched my movie, but like, or watched things that I've written. But they have like read my scripts and going, man, the dialogue is on point. And I'm like, well, if it really was on point, you probably wouldn't have noticed, right? Like, isn't that kind of the point? They're like, no, you don't understand. I've read, what they say all the time, they're like, I've read so many bad scripts where you look at the thing and you're like, wow, this is really bad. And then you see, and bad can be where no one talks like this, and also where it's just very obvious, where people read like a dialogue and they're like, oh, I know what he's trying to do here. Whereas people have told me, they're like, I read your script and I realize what you're trying to do there. It's not like it's so obvious to me, but like I instinctively get it. And then as I'm going through more and more, I'm wondering if you can keep that up, because like I'm thinking, oh, is Andrew just lucky with that line? Was that just a really good line of dialogue that he hit on? And then I'm looking to see if you're going to fall short, and I noticed that you just don't. And to me, that was a real revelation. I was like, I just write what I hear in my head. Like I really don't actively think about it. So like people have told me, they're like, you and Tarantino and da-da-da. And I'm like, do not put me next to Tarantino. Like, what the fuck are you smoking? And then it's the same thing for structure. People have told me, they're like, I don't know how you do it. Like there was so I go to a writer's group and there's one guy there. Have you ever heard of the book Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell?
Yeah.
So there's a guy that came to that writer's group and he worked with Joseph Campbell. Actually, like Joseph Campbell was a friend of his. And like Joseph Campbell, I believe, produced some of his play works for either Broadway or off Broadway. I don't remember, to be honest with you. But I had brought in several scripts in and he had read them. And every single time he was just always amazed. And one time after a meeting, he pulled me aside and he goes, I just want you to know that if Joe were here today, he would be in awe of you. And I'm just like, this is like a close personal friend to one of the greatest like writing instructors of all time. The guy that taught George Lucas how to write Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like one of his close friends. I don't know if the guy was just building me up, but like to me, I read something and I'm like, okay, this has happened. This has happened. Now this has to happen. Like it's just so clearly obvious to me that I take it for granted. And so here's where I'm going to come back to your point where it's like that I'm not grateful for is I don't feel like I believe that it's valid. The praise that I get about the dialogue and the structure thing. I think I've gone to the other point with it where it's not that I'm not grateful about it. It's almost that I got cocky with it for a minute, just a minute. And now I have like a reverse self-doubt where it's like, oh, am I being too perfect in my structure? Do I need to change something so it's not obvious? So I don't know if I'm just not grateful and like I'm just not like letting it go. Like I feel like I have to put a problem on myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, what I'm wondering too is when you're feeling concerned about like, do you feel concerned about structure as a crutch?
No, I think the it's not so much a crutch. It's the fact that because people have said things to me about both structure and dialogue.
Yeah.
I feel I have a responsibility to live up to my own hype.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Where if this script comes in and that structure is not sound or that dialogue is not on point, then I'm people will say that I'm slipping, and it's one of those I have to continuously please my parents kind of weird Freudian clockworks going on in my head. So it's almost like I wish I didn't get the praise. And you know what I mean? As much as artists, we crave that validation and praise. It's like, no matter what, I'm so fucked up that I'm going to find a way to make it into a problem.
Well, I definitely say like, it would have been nice to have somebody with a good sense of naturalistic dialogue to give some pointers for Batman White Knight. Because all the things that I had talked about were issues for Shango Murphy. Came to the forefront, in that book, which is that he really struggled with writing naturalistic dialogue. But so I guess I'm saying that to be like, it is a strength if it's something that people are like praising you for, I think that it's something to at least acknowledge and understand it as the thing that pops out, right?
Yeah.
When people think about your work, think about it as the thing that pops out. And so you can probably worry less about those things and worry more on the things that are weaknesses,
well,
especially if nobody points them out as your strength.
That's the thing, is I don't really know what my weaknesses are. I'm not saying I don't have them. I'm not that egotistical. But I think part of my problem is that I have no tact when it comes to critiquing other people's artists, because I'm craving some kind of critique.
Well, and this is the annoying thing, is that people don't generally want to point out weaknesses.
Right.
They only do that if you ask very specifically.
Or if you are an asshole and they feel like they finally have the opportunity to be the asshole back. Like, but even then it's not constructive, because you're like, oh, well, he's just saying that because he's trying to get under my skin or what I mean? Trying to tear me down. But at the same time, it's like, see, when I do that, when I try to critique people, and not to go back to that podcast, but I always like to do it through questions, because I feel like that's the best way to get someone to open up, where I ask someone, what's your intention here? Or why did you write that line that way? Or why is this scene happening now? Like, instead of, you know what I mean? Instead of, oh, I don't get this. Or that sounds weird. Or, oh, this scene doesn't fit. Like, those are more like, those are demeaning in some kind of way. Whereas I feel like if I can ask questions to people, I can get that critique, because I can get answers to them, and then I can respond to those answers where it's like, oh, see, I didn't understand. And then I put it back on me, where I'm like, oh, I didn't understand that's what you were trying to say with this scene, because I read this word with a little bit, more of a sarcastic tone, or whatever, whatever it may be.
Well, and that ultimately gets to the heart also as to like what critique is, which is like, you're basically doing that transference between people, where the person who made the work finally can know with some degree of certainty whether or not they were able to successfully communicate what they were trying to communicate.
Right. And the problem I have found 9 times out of 10 is, because I'm dealing with a lot of amateurs, and I'm saying that in myself as a kind of an amateur. People don't know what they're trying to do. Do you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, oh, I saw Free Willy and that movie made me cry, so I want to make a movie about a fish that'll make people cry. Yeah. But they don't understand what the thematic premise is most of the time. And that's where things start running awry and they don't have an answer for me, so then I can't really critique them. That's really where the problem starts arising. Like I've had a guy who he was like a big, and I want to say, and this is not being bombastic at all, the dude was like a fucking rocket scientist. And he wanted to take his stab at screenwriting. And everything he had about this computer AI thing that this thing was about was technically spot on. But he had no fucking idea what the story was about. And when I tried to get that out of him, he got frustrated. And I tried using every kind of language. I dumbed it down. I used, high intellectual words because he was a very smart, brilliant, engineer. Nothing could get the right thing from him. And he got frustrated and then just he took it out on me for a little bit and then he just shut down. And that to me was like the worst experience because I never want to make someone feel like that. It sounds like I'm demeaning someone right here, but I'm not building myself higher than I am. But I like showing people so they can figure out their own problem. Whereas if I say it, you know what I'm saying? So I like to think sometimes when people shut down, it's like they realize they fucked up and they're embarrassed and they don't want to get too far. But
I feel like that's psychologically omni-applicable to everything, where the things that help people realize their mistakes is allowing them to come to that awareness on their own.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like you can apply this to like moral debacles, politics, everything. They have to come to it on their own, or they're just not going to. They're not going to integrate that lesson.
Right. The host is not going to take. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But like, so I'm grateful. I am grateful that I'm able to do that stuff. But then, you see, it's weird because praise and like innate skills, like you can be humble and grateful about it. And then, like I said, there's kind of like a mentality where now I have to live up to the mantle. And then on the other side, it's like, oh, well, I want to be, praised for my shot design. I want to be praised for my editing or my direction. And then you start maybe focusing a little too hard on those areas and things start suffering. So I don't know. I don't know if being grateful about a skill set or something is, I want to say conducive, but I don't know if that's the right word. Helpful to an artist? I don't know. I feel like we do need a sense of ego, don't you?
Yeah, well, and I was just something that I was thinking about when you were saying that, and I was thinking about a lot of what you were talking about in regards to critique. Is something that I know that I'm starting to take for granted is my ability to kind of pick apart and analyze and point out like, oh, hey, here's what you could fix about this or this or that. Like during my trip to Taos, I had this experience where I had met somebody who, I mean, it's Taos, it's an art town, so a lot of people are doing a lot of different projects, and sometimes there are people who are
Where is this again? What is this?
In New Mexico. It's upper New Mexico, northern New Mexico. So like, there are a lot of people doing film projects and stuff, and somebody had found out that like I was doing comics and wanted to pick my brain about like a story pitch they were doing for like an animated series. And it turns out like at first I was like, well, it's not going to take long. I'll just take a look at it, sure, whatever. And then as I was reading through it, I realized like, oh shit, I like have all the knowledge and experience this person was looking for, and I kind of forgot about it. Like I had taken for granted, like I had all these experiences of like doing workshops with people who have experience in the industry, and like, going to school specifically for like storyboarding and television and sequential art, and like, so I was just able to like take all these notes, and I basically like in 30 minutes ran through the whole thing of like, here are all the things you could do better to make your pitch more accessible. And it made me realize like, oh, I have all this knowledge, and I kind of just assumed that, I don't know why, but I assume that this is common knowledge, and it really isn't. It's not very common. Like it's not, people need people to talk to in regards to having consultation or just like taking information in about like spitballing their ideas, right? And sometimes I realize I take that for granted because I think with the internet, like I just assume like all that information is just like free like water.
It's not even that it's free like water. It's that people are actually out there drinking that water. You know what I mean? Like, you could have tutorials on YouTube and blogs and all that kind of stuff, breaking things down just as easy and free as anything. But if people aren't taking the time to read, understand, that's another important aspect. You can't just read something and know it sometimes. Like, you have to reread, you have to apply, you have to critique yourself, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot that goes into it. Like, right now I'm teaching myself not color theory, but color grading, in terms of how I can subtly affect things. You've seen a couple of things on my Instagram where I took the exact same shot where it was very desaturated on the ingest where it was captured, which is called a log in film. And then I'm applying different gradients, which are pulling certain colors forward, more saturated than others, more contrast, less contrast, more exposure, more shadow, more, you know what I mean? Like, the variables change to do things differently. And I'm not only learning about the subtleties of that and how it affects a viewer when they're watching a film, but I'm also learning about, what time of day I should be shooting at, because the color temperature of the sun is different at different points of the day, different points of the year, different, all that kind of stuff. So it's really about taking the time to fully grasp something. You can't just like watch one YouTube video on it and completely get it. So my problem, like you're talking about, kind of like a pay it forward type thing, where it's like, oh, this is so obvious, but I realize that some people don't, know this. Yeah. I've gotten there where I'm like, oh, people don't know this is how you're supposed to write a line of dialogue. People don't know structure is supposed to work like this for a reason. Like, it's supposed to be formulaic. My problem is that when I turn around and try to educate people, they're not looking for that education at that point in time. They instantly get angry when I try to, and you know what I mean? Like, like even one time I tried to explain it to a woman, and she turned around and said I was mansplaining, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to do that. Yeah. I'm trying to share with you my experience, and you know what I mean? Like, and they're not receptive to it. So like that to me hurts, because I want to help people see things the way I see it and share knowledge, but at the same time, I don't want to be an egotist. I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to come off as I'm like trying to be holier than thou, or or a snobby. A snobby is the right word. But I just can't do it. And like I'm trying to figure out that line where you can be grateful about having these skills and then sharing them with people, but finding people who are receptive to them is like, it's terribly, terribly hard. So when you're telling me someone came up and wanted to pick your brain, that's awesome. That's like hitting the jackpot, in my opinion, because I like the idea. Like, that's one of my favorite things about the writers group is like, when we read a script, as soon as we're done, everyone will look at me. And it's almost a joke at this point, where all the eyes of the table turn to me at the exact same time when we finish that last page. And my first thing out of the mouth is, I'm not going first. Someone else is going to talk. And because most of the time I don't want people to parrot me, first of all. And secondly, I like to kind of get an idea of who is in line with me. And then I'll be like, oh, Joe was right when he said that this line on page 12 isn't working. Like, I like being able to back people up. And because I feel
makes
like
sense.
Like when I have that clout that I'm not really grateful for, I guess I'm grateful for, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that is the right way to do it. Where
I don't know if you see it this way, but that's actually a pretty useful leadership skill, to like use the confirmation of others as like a way of stating your opinion.
Yes.
Because I think what you're saying is a super important skill to have, to like distribute your power out so that you're not the focus.
Yeah, because that's what I hate. I hate when those eyes turn to me. I mean, for a first little while, it was an absolute ego crack cocaine hit. You know what I mean? Like, when you spend so much time not being validated and not being loved and praised and stuff as an artist, it really is soul crushing for a while. And then when you finally kind of find a stride, like, and all of the praise is raining on you like paparazzi flashes, it's like living in the moonlight. But after a while, like, You know, you talk to any Hollywood A-lister and they're like, oh man, I hate the fact that I can't go to fucking Publix without, you know, a photographer following me around.
Yeah.
And, you know, it gets old. So it got to that point with me where I hated the eyes at the table turning to me. And so I like being able to build up other people. And I feel like even though we're critiquing Tina's script, if I can say Matt had a good comment, then I'm making Matt look like a better screenwriter. And then if Matt's comment was a compliment to Tina's script, I'm giving them both a boost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not, it doesn't shine back on me as being an egotist. That's really what I don't want, because I don't want to be that person. I want to, like you said, share my opinion through others. But then at the same time, you know, when there's stuff I disagree with, I'm like, no, Danny's fucking wrong. Like, that's the wrong thing to say. I would not back Danny's comment. And then I would usually go into, you know, Terry, why did you write it this way? See, that's why Danny's comment is wrong, because you're trying to do that. And I think you're close, but you're not there. And Danny wants to hijack your script. I don't say that, but that's usually what I'm thinking.
Sure.
But it's good, you know, it's good to be like that, because I feel like we're talking about being grateful. And I guess that's kind of what happens when you get to a point of power, is that you have to make other people feel grateful for their skills. Like, it's not your responsibility to eat the gratefulness. It's your responsibility to pass it out to the other plates. If that, give them back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a great expression from back when I was taking martial arts that we used to kind of instill, which was give back more than you take. And I very much believe in that. So like, it's like if somebody came to me and volunteered on my film and they were there for a feature film the entire time and they didn't take any pay, I would volunteer on 3 of their feature films just as a thank you for that one feature. You know what I mean? Like, that's the mindset that I always have. And I remember when you wrote down this, because I have a horrible memory, in our exchanges about what we were going to talk about, but you said being grateful for people. I am totally grateful for a gentleman that worked with me on Digits named Don, who was the movie would not have been made if it was not for Don, because Don worked audio most of the time, and that's a job nobody wanted, nobody took. And, you know, he was an actor. He played Angel in the film as well, but nobody wants to hold the boom. Like, they want to for like a production still so they can use it on their Facebook and like, oh, look at me, I'm holding the boom. And they didn't want to do that. But Don would show up every day early with me, help me get set up, help me get lights going, help, make sure the mic was going, all that kind of stuff. And so I don't have Don anymore because Don's far away. We kind of lost touch with each other. Don't have Don anymore. So like when I'm trying to do haunted home theater or a little like cooking show video or this or that, I got nobody to hold the boom mic. And I was grateful for Don then. I'm even more grateful for him now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does.
It's hard, and that's the one thing about filmmaking that it's a lot different from most other mediums of art, is that the people you rely on, even now, like finding an actor right now is kind of tough too. But it's just one of those things, man. You got to be, you got to move forward somehow.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's something that I know that I've been becoming more and more grateful of over time are like my regular readers for Trailer Park Warlock. Like
audience, I didn't think of that.
A cycle that I kind of go through is like, so when I start a season out, the first 5 or so episodes, there's a ton of readers who respond and give feedback, Yeah. And it starts to slip off over the course of the season. So like you go from maybe the first episode, it's like 150 comments or something like that. And then towards the end, it's like maybe 30. And that used to bum me out, like I think the first couple of seasons that kind of bummed me out because it made me think, as many people are reading or whatever. Over time, like I became aware of like, well, maybe not as many people are commenting, but a lot of people are reading. And there are definitely people who I can almost reliably, like I can name them off, like they're going to comment. And like, I really appreciate those people. I'm really grateful for those people because I think of them as like, you know,
your core,
like people. Yeah, like people in my community, basically.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like people who
kind of kindred spirits, if you will.
Yeah, and like people who I feel confident, like, you know, they're probably talking about my story with other people when they're like wanting to recommend stuff. You know, people who are who may even think about me as a person on some level, that's always the validation we're always looking for as artists, right? Like, can I get complete strangers, to think about me for no reason at all?
By only through my work. Not even, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're following you on Twitter or anything like that. Like, they're just commenting on Webtoons. So it's like, that's pretty amazing, though. I had one experience with that where someone sent me an email after Digits came out, and they said that they had been going through a rough time, and you know there was relationship problems, but they sent me this big long email, and it was just about how they watched Digits, and they literally said for 2 hours I was escaped from all of my problems, and they just wanted to say
that's awesome.
They wanted to say thank you to me, which made the entire, and I don't know if you remember right after Digits, but I was exhausted. Doesn't even begin to, that's like tip of the iceberg to describe how I was. I was a beaten and battered person. There was very little of me left, and I needed to recover. And it was one of those things where I wasn't getting validation, I wasn't getting praise, I wasn't getting not support, that's not the right word, I wasn't getting, I don't know what the right word is. I'm going to skip over it, but like, for example, like my father was giving credit to some of the dialogue that I had written to the actors who said it. Does that make sense? So it's like, oh, I'm getting praised, but I'm not getting praised. And for someone to have taken the time to write out an email, just one person, one guy sent me an email, was enough to, like, it was like Mario grabbing a mushroom. You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden, my posture was better, and my mood was better, and I was much more positive and optimistic and friendly, and I had more energy and life back into me. And I was grateful for that. That was one of the things that I think was the best takeaways from Digits, was that it made every single day that, you know, I was on the set of Digits, because this was a very terrible production. I had no idea what I was doing, and I like, it was me and Don on crew. That was it. I was burned. I was electrified twice. I sprained my ankle. I caught a cold because I was. Cold sounds like a little stupid thing to bitch about, but I mean, like, I was outside in 20-degree weather for hours at a time. And, you know, like, it gets cold, and I did not have proper clothing on for this in New England. Like, there was a lot of shit that I went through on top of arguments with cast and fellow producers, making sure footage was safe, making sure we got all the shots, making sure the places were clear. Like, it's hard. So for me to go through that entire experience and thinking that it was being overlooked by, like, parents who were praising other people for stuff, and then finally getting one person to send me an email, said, "This was fucking awesome. Thank you for giving me a reprieve from life's problems for 2 hours." That was something that made me really grateful. Like, that email came through, that somebody took the time to do that for me. And it maybe took them 20 minutes to write that email, but it validated, you know, a year and a half's worth of work.
Yeah. And no, I mean, if we're gonna, somebody else who I'm super grateful for is my editor, one of my two editors. I'm grateful for both of them. Ethan LeBlanc's awesome, but especially Christine Kim. She has made Trailer Park Warlock, like, proofread to a T. Wow. Like, she has definitely, like, done such a great job of, like, picking up on my, like, I remember the first thing I think she picked up on was, like, Antarctica. Like, I just could not spell Antarctica for the life of me. You know, like, and there's a couple episodes where, like, I use that word a lot, and she's like, here. I was like, oh my God, thank you. Because, like, like initially my response is, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go back and fix all this. But then my second response is like, oh my God, thank you for like reading through and picking all that stuff out.
Yeah.
Because that's all stuff that I would have to eventually go back and like look through later on if I ever do a print version. And that saves me so much time. And also, I mean, just upfront, like when publishing it digitally, like it makes it a better reading experience for everybody else, who's getting access to it.
Is there a print version in the future? There has to be. There has to be.
I want to. It's in my mind, like it's formatted for it. It's just a matter of time and finding the right time and the resources to do it. Basically.
I got a question for you, and this will fall under the whole being grateful thing. I'm going to frame it that way.
All right.
Are you at all concerned? Because given how I don't want to call them failures, because I honest to God do not believe they are that. However, for Garage Raja and Bat Monster, in comparison to Trailer Park Warlock, do not have the same level of fan base, correct?
Right.
Do you feel like if you, or when you complete Trailer Park Warlock, you do something else and it falls next to Bat Monster, Garage Raja, doesn't really do it, and like say, I don't know, you're jammed up for money or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And you come back for Trailer Park Warlock again. Are you going to be grateful for for Trailer Park Warlock, or are you going to be kind of upset that you had to go back? Like, basically what I'm asking is, do you feel like you'll be typecast? Like, should people who feel like they're typecast, or like, if nobody wants movies from George Lucas that aren't Star Wars. Does that make sense?
I gotcha.
So, you know what I mean? Like, what are your feelings on that? Should an artist be grateful that they have one hit, or should they be like, I don't know what the right, again, I'm at a loss for words.
I get what you're saying. Like, I feel grateful I have anything right now. Cause
but what I say, you've talked openly about the fact that at some point Trailer Park Warlock is going to end. And do you feel like at some point you won't be grateful for it anymore because you'll be wanting to move forward and wanting your audience to give your next thing a chance? And they're too like clingy to Trailer Park Warlock. Are you at all concerned about that?
I'm not having that concern right now. I mean, I definitely for me, like embracing the idea of ending Trailer Park Warlock is partially coping, like coping with the fact that I do have to end it.
Yeah.
Because like I could have done it for a lot longer than I ended up, the time that I'm actually given. And so I'm trying to embrace this like, well, I'm just grateful for the time that I'm actually given, because I'm able to, like, if this is my last project, I just want to make sure it's everything that I am, like, that's in my heart right now. Like, it's just out there. It's out of my mind. It's out of my body. It's somewhere else. I don't have to think about it anymore. It's not like...
It's been expressed.
It's been expressed. Like, that's what I'm trying to get at. And if I still have other stuff to express after this, sure, I'll be grateful for that, I think. I mean, it could be a curse to be like, oh, I have other things I want to say. Damn it.
But I guess what I'm getting at is like, would you ever feel like you would not be grateful for Trailer Park Warlock? Like, do you feel like at some point it could become a ball and chain to your future work?
Right now, it's hard for me to imagine that. And it's just, and I guess I say it right now because of the perspective of where I am right now, where it's just like, this is what I've got, and it's not like it's not like there's a whole lot of other opportunities available right now. So for me, it's like, well, I got to be grateful for what I have. Because otherwise I'll be, I don't know, otherwise like I'll be resentful for something that like I haven't even finished, or like I haven't, you know what I mean? Like I'll be resentful of the one, shot I did have, basically, which to me it seems like a waste of something that beforehand wasn't even like imaginable. So like, I guess that's where I'm coming from. Because for me, like, before like that opportunity for Trailer Park Warlock, I was having one of the biggest struggles in my life, like emotionally. I was just like, my mental health was in a horrible place. My whole life was just in a bad place. And so like, I guess I look at it as there's this huge opportunity that had entered my life that really gave me an outlet to like get away from all the worst parts of my life at that time, and also give me an opportunity to gave me an opportunity to totally express myself, gave me an opportunity to like make money. And during COVID, where I just had this opportunity to save money, basically, like for me, it's been, I can't express it as anything other than a huge like help.
So basically. In other words, so I guess what you're saying is like, yeah, you're grateful for the fan base, but you are more grateful for Trailer Park Warlock in general, because that in itself was, I don't want to call it saving grace, but cathartic for you. Like Trailer Park Warlock is what you're thankful for just being able to have that story unfold and the opportunity to tell that story. Like that helped you so much.
Well, and I have to be also grateful for the fan base, because if they weren't there, there's no way that like
everything else
would even be on board for it. Like I feel like those in a certain sense go hand in hand.
I got
so
you.
Like I hope my fan base will be around for another story,
Yeah.
And if they're not, well, I mean, I'll have to figure out how to move on from there.
And this is where I wanted to get into it with me, was I think I may have told this story once before, but again, the writers group that I attend, I had brought in several scripts in, and most of them, or all of them, I should say, were shorts. So anywhere between like 12 and 20-ish pages, right? They're just short films.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in a wide variety. So I had a Christmas one where I've spoken about this quite often, but Santa Claus finds a present in his bag that he thought he forgot to deliver, but it turns out it was a present from a kid, and he can't open it for a year because it's not Christmas anymore. Mrs. Claus won't let him do it. It's a funny little Christmas short that I had written. Then there was, what else had I brought in? God, I can't even remember. It's been so long because we have not had a meeting, but we're actually going to be starting up again soon. But the point of the matter is, I remember I had one that was a Christmas one. I remember I had one that was just like a stupid stoner comedy. And then there was like another one, and I forgot what they were. But they were, the point of the matter is this, they were not horror, right? And everybody enjoyed them quite a bit. And then when I brought in Haunted, the roof blew off. And I had someone literally say to me, your other stuff is good, but this is where you need to stay in this genre. And I was never more offended in my entire life. Like I was probably visibly turning red at that compliment. I guess it was meant as a compliment. That's the thing. The person who told me that was trying to give me a compliment, but I in fact no way took it that way. Where I felt like I have a range as a writer. I don't feel like I should be, just a horror writer. Like, because a lot of people, and I'm not looking down on horror. I love horror. There's no disputing that. Right. I love horror. I would definitely visit horror in so many different angles and perspectives and subgenres and so on and so forth. I could do that all the live long day. I don't want to. I want to tell the story. I want to tell the story of Endom. I want to tell the another story set at Christmas. I want to tell a story about little kids who are pretending to be spies in their neighborhood and stopping the drug dealers in their neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, there are so many. I want to tell Cemetery Sweethearts, which is not really a horror movie. It's more like a rom-com. And I guess I got kind of upset, and I wasn't grateful for Haunted anymore, despite all of the screenwriting awards and all the people that want to invest and do like, oh, I want to read it. Oh, I want to be a part of it. Oh, I want to act in it. Oh, I want to blah, 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 blah. I resented Haunted, which was one of my greatest, things, because other people started putting me in a box. And it was weird to me to start to hate one of my own works. It really was an odd feeling where it was like, no one is going to give Endom a chance because they're so caught up on Haunted. There were literally people going, So there's going to be a sequel, right? You writing a sequel? I'm like, oh, I have a couple of ideas. Worst answer I could have given. Worst answer I could have given, because now everybody's always like, well, when's Andy bringing in the sequel to Haunted? I'm like, I don't think there's going to be one. They're like, what do you mean? You can't not have a sequel to this movie. And I'm like, I don't think I want one now. And they're, oh, you got to. And it's like, so now I'm going to have to live with that, with those people for so long. And then it's going to be,
Sure.
It taught me the lesson of, not putting the cart before the horse. So like if I, when I make Haunted and if I get interviewed about it or anything and someone says, oh, well, is there going to be a sequel? No. even if I end up thinking about making a sequel, I will not tell anyone about making a sequel to it, because it's weird, but I want to be grateful for how great Haunted is and how well received it is. And like you, it definitely helped me work through some stuff that I was going through thematically. I was able to hide a lot of things that I couldn't say in real life. That's one of the things that I am thankful for about art, is that, or storytelling, I should say. I can say things that I can't say out loud. And it's not that they're wrong to say. It's not, they're things that I have trouble expressing, either because of how I think of myself or how I think people will react to it, or whatever reason it may be. There are things that I just feel like I can't say out loud that I can kind of put into a film and, like you said, express that. And it gets out of my head, which is what the worst place for something a thought to be for an artist.
Oh, dude, I had an experience where, so like I've been in my hometown for a little bit the last, this week, but also just like in general, kind of off and on. And so when I do come to visit my hometown, there was this one time where I was like going into Starbucks and I saw somebody like they were clearly working on like some kind of artwork outside. And I was like, oh, I'm going to see what this dude's doing. And so like, I was just like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, can I check out your work? Like kind of awkwardly, but I was just like, I wanted to strike up conversation because it's nice to see people working on art in the wild. Because like when I'm working on art, I feel like I'm kind of like a loner, in that sense. There's not that many people doing that. They're like either, studying for some college thing,
especially
or
at
like
Starbucks. Usually they're writers.
Yeah. Or if even that, like they're like, doing some kind of abstract thing that I don't really understand that the working corporate world does, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, here's somebody who's working on art. I just want to check out what they're doing. And I started like chatting him up, and like he showed me his work. He was like an older person, like say like in his 60s. And like as we were talking, like I came to, because like this guy looks familiar to me and I can't figure it out. And I figured out, like, after a while, I just asked him, I was like, oh, were you a coach at my middle school? And he was. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, he had, like, retired and, like, gone through all this stuff, right? Where, like, his wife had died and he'd gone through surgery and all this other stuff. And we were just talking about art. And he was like, yeah, I do this every day because this is the thing that's keeping me sane. Like, this is the thing that allows me to kind of, like, just detach from all of the like craziness in the world. Like I can just kind of be in my own place and express my ideas and express myself. And that to me, like, that was one of those, for me, it was like kind of one of those pure moments of just like connection and like realizing like, something that I think not necessarily every artist takes it for granted. I know that I take it for granted, which is just being able to have that ability to be able to put on to paper or put on to whatever to communicate what you're thinking and feeling, so that you're not just like, you're not in a place where you don't feel like you can properly express yourself. And that's always something, and going back to what you were talking about earlier about how like you're trying to help people to like connect better with their ability to express themselves. That for them probably ends up being like a point of frustration, right? Is like, if they're not following the advice, if they just kind of going with whatever, they may find themselves really frustrated when they're trying to like write something or draw something or whatever, put an idea into a screenplay or whatnot.
Some kind of tangible form.
Yeah, where they just find themselves like frustrated with like, I can't get this idea out to people. Why can't I do that? You know, and that's, I mean, unfortunately, that's sort of their mistake that they're going to have to learn from, because that is, I remember like having that frustration like at least the first 3 years of art school, but definitely like when I started like really trying to seriously draw comics in high school, I know that I experienced that frustration from high school all the way till like senior year of art school, because I just could not. There were ways in which I was trying to connect, being able to like properly communicate myself, and it got better obviously as I started to get into that self-corrective process. But before I was able to even acquire what that self-corrective process was, it was just kind of a crapshoot, right? Like, like I have an idea, I try and get it out there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
This is why, and we're talking about gratitude, so I think that this is within the lines of humility. This is why I think a lot of amateur artists suck, is because there's a certain level of humility required to be self-critical to a point where you're not being self-critical to be destructive towards yourself, or, you know what I mean? Like there are people who get depressed who will cut themselves. They call them cutters and this and that. Usually they're teen girls or stuff like that. Like they cause harm to themselves in order to get praise or attention or love or support from other people. Mm-hmm. And then there's a different kind of way that you can cause harm to yourself that makes you better, which is lifting weights. Because if you're lifting weights and it hurts, like the muscles are starting to give out and your body is shaking and this and that, it's because you're breaking down muscle that's going to repair itself and grow and get stronger. So there's two different ways to be self-critical, just like there are two ways to be self-harmful, I guess you'd say. And I would say a lot of the amateur artists can be more on the cutter side of it, where they will put themselves down continuously, or they will just beat themselves up internally, or whatever it may be.
Sure.
Whereas I'm grateful as an artist, and this has nothing to do with my normal types of depression, but I was able to get over that type of depression where I thought that I sucked, because I mentally told myself, all right, you suck. What are you going to do about it? So then I picked up a book and I read. I was like, oh, my dialogue is sucking. Blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe I should read a dialogue book. Oh, I don't really know what someone's talking about when they talk about camera apertures. Oh, I should watch this YouTube tutorial. And I'm taking time away from doing my art, and that's hurting me sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I should be doing stuff. But then because I'm doing that, I'm self-improving. Like, those are the, you know what I mean? Yeah. Where it takes a certain level, and I'm grateful now that I have the ability to look at something of my own objectively and say, this sucks, and not be personal about it. That's something I'm so grateful about, is being able to look at my own work, go, this sucks, but now I'm going to fix it. And that, I think, is something that I absolutely take for granted, is the ability to say, it's okay that it sucks when I look at my own work. And I don't think a lot of artists, or, a lot of amateur artists, or maybe even some professional artists, I don't know what they're dealing with, but
that is definitely, like, that can be an extremely liberating feeling, to be able to make something and be like, not my best, and then move on. Like, it's
or double down and bear down to fix it. Like, that's something I don't know about you, but I take that for granted, that I have that fortitude now. I didn't always have that. I didn't. I would be the guy who crumpled up the piece of paper, threw it in the waste can, set the waste can on fire, dumped it out into the river, pissed in the river. You know what I'm saying? Like, just completely did self-destructive things that just did not help me in any way whatsoever. So I am absolutely grateful for my ability to be able to look at myself and self-critique in a way that's not self-destructive.
Yeah.
That's something I don't know about you, but like that took a while to get to.
That's it's not, I was going to say it's like a superpower. It's like it's a skill. It's one of the most important skills that you can acquire as an artist.
Absolutely.
Because it is like the thing from which you can build off anything else, because it allows you to align yourself with your vision. Allows you to align yourself with what it is you're trying to manifest, right? Like long term, and you have to be willing to go like, okay, does this line up? If it doesn't line up, what are you going to do about it? Do you leave it and then move on to the next thing and just do better? Or do you fix it now and then make sure that you integrate all those lessons into the next thing? And it is like, going back to what you were saying about like building muscle, it is over time like a muscle that you build, and you can plateau too sometimes. Oh, sure. And that can be kind of a tricky situation, because for me, like, I think for me, like, I get into this weird tension, maybe is the best way of calling it, where it's like I have to meet deadlines. So I find what is the best compromise of like, okay, this is what I can do with all my time. I'm going to maximize it. It may not be 100% to what I want exactly, but at the same time, there's a point at which I have to let go and move on.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
yeah.
I eat further into my deadline.
You'll be down the rabbit hole. And
exactly.
Yeah, no, that's another thing that I think that and that's something I think, so we're talking about being grateful about something. I think being aware of something is the first step of heading towards being grateful. And what you're talking about now with the idea of compromise and being okay with it and multitasking is kind of a weird way to look at it. But like for me, I'm looking at things and I'm like, okay, I can keep hammering on this script until the last day that I'm alive. Or I can start shot designing knowing that I have problems in the first act and leave it where it is and come back to it at some other point, or just settle with the fact that it's as good as it's going to be in order to become actionable. And I think that's something...
I was going to say, on some level, it is sort of finding gratitude in what you were able to do with the time that you were given.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like quality of what you did in a certain amount of time.
Yeah. Because it is always... when time is involved, it's always a compromise.
But it is.
Right?
It doesn't matter if you have a deadline or not. Your deadline is the day you die.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but the deadline is not, hey, Andrew, write the perfect script. Hey, Andrew, make a perfect movie. It's, hey, Andrew, make the movie.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to look at it and go, okay, I really want to make Haunted. I really want to make Indom. I really want to make Spy Agency. I really want to make Cemetery Sweethearts. But I could keep writing Haunted over and over and over and over until I get it right and never do any of those other things.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think about being actionable, is that it's important, is taking, you have to be grateful for what you're able to do and sometimes move on. I think that's we have to be perspective. You have to look at yourself and be like, oh, I did pretty damn good for me. Or
exactly, and that is the mindset that it's taken me a while to adopt. But once I adopted it, it allowed me to detach myself from the idea of like, from start to finish, I'm going to have this perfect oeuvre, like this perfect body of work.
Yeah,
it's like, no, you're going to be a growing artist. It's going to start off a little shaky, and then as you go on, you get better and better and better. Like, this is something I've been thinking about, is like every season I feel like, oh, this is the season I finally started learning how to draw. And I know like next season I'm going to have the exact same feeling where I'm going to look back at stuff and be like, oh God, like, and this is something I take for granted, because like what I don't realize is I eventually have people who talk with me about like my artwork, and they say like, oh, this is awesome, and have nothing but praise, and they don't notice any of the things that I notice. The only reason I notice it is because it's me. I made it. Yeah. I'm picking myself apart. Nobody else is paying attention to that stuff. or they don't recognize it as a flaw. They just think it's part of the style or whatever, you know.
I also think that's a good tool. Like I talk frequently about not wanting to be perceived as egotistical, but when you're talking to someone who thinks highly of you already, and you can look at your own work and be like, see, now this is a mistake I made, and this is in the finished thing. And you know what I mean? Like you start pointing out your flaws. That's like showing your Achilles heel to someone. That's a lot of trust that comes out of that. And I think it's you know, an artist who can be humble and admit things like that, that is something to be grateful for about yourself, because I don't want to say artists are guarded, because we are very sensitive people. There's no disputing that. Like, like you can spit on us and we'll fall over and pretend that we're being murdered. And it's just one of those things, you know what I mean? So like, I'm grateful for the times that I have failed, and I can look back at them and say, no, that was a failure. And now I know now how not to do that. And again, it goes back to that whole I suck and not taking it personally, or this sucks and I did this wrong, or whatever like that. I think that's really where I'm going to be settled on this for this podcast, is that I'm grateful for that muscle that built for me, that got me out of an artistic depression, that got me out of a personal depression, that bettered me. You know what I mean? Like that muscle is very, very important. So I think that's the thing that I'm grateful for the most. And you know what else I'm grateful for? Because we're coming up on the end. This podcast.
For sure.
We have a dedicated listener base of like 3. And I'm pretty sure one of them is you. The other one is me. Just checking to make sure that the levels were okay and the file uploaded all right. But the actual... Well, first of all, we need to acknowledge number one thing. These podcasts are uploaded to the internet. And if anything goes on the internet, whether it be nudes or podcasts or whatever, the internet holds it forever. So Rainwater, you could get hired by Marvel next week, create a new superhero that suddenly takes the world by storm, and someone will find this podcast, and then all of a sudden it hits Reddit, and you know we have like 100,000 people listening to every episode that we backlogged. Or I get hired to do some fucking Avatar movie that James Cameron didn't finish, and somewhat suddenly it was the one that saved the franchise. I don't know. But the point of the matter is this, is like these episodes that we have done for 51 weeks. We're coming up on our 1 year anniversary. Have been, I don't want to say cathartic because we've already talked about that, but it's like been, and I don't want to say cathartic. I don't want to say validating, but it has been joyful for me to talk with you and with other artists about art philosophy, art technique, art growing, art failures, art whatever, and not feel so alone about it. Because when I talk to friends and family and stuff about it here, they don't have the same experiences that we have. They're not the same, you know, I don't want to call it sensitive people, but like they're not the same type of people that we are. Artists are a different breed. And to talk to you, to talk to Joker, to talk to Diego, to talk to Pullman, to talk to Joe Bevel, to talk to Aaron, to talk to, you know what I mean? Like I could name all of our guests and everybody that we've had on, and people that, you know, 1 or 2 people that have maybe messaged me or whatever like that, has been so great. And, you know, and it started as a joke. Like I tweeted about 300 followers or whatever. Oh, when do I got to start a podcast? And you were like, now. All right. And it started as a joke, and I'm so grateful that we followed through on it. And you know what I mean? Like, because it's something that I look forward to every week. Like sometimes you have obligations and you're like, oh, I got to do this again. Can we just quit this? Blah, blah, blah. And I don't feel that way about this podcast. And I don't care that we have 1 to 3 listeners or whatever like that. And sometimes we talk about actual spaghetti, and we have like 1,000 people suddenly tune in.
That might have to be an actual episode at the Spaghetti Factory where we just make spaghetti.
Hey, you know what? I can actually send you a jar of my sauce now. I don't know if you saw this, but I learned how to jar sauces so that they don't spoil. And I know I know that it worked because I jarred it in August and I ate it last week. and it has not been in my fridge.
Did you get sick?
I did not get sick. That was the thing. I made sure I did it on a day where I didn't have anything to do the next day or the day after, just in case I got like 2 days worth of food poisoning, but it worked. It was sitting on my shelf for a couple months, so I was pretty jazzed to figure that out. But anyway,
nice.
We could just do an episode where we talk about making spaghetti, because I know how to make spaghetti from scratch. I know how to make sauce from scratch. I know how to run tomatoes through the food mill, all that kind of jazz. Make meatball, chicken parm. We could do a whole spaghetti episode. That to me, that's more like episode 100 type thing.
Right?
That's a gimmick episode right there. But either way, like, the point of the matter that I was getting at was, like, this podcast is something that I'm absolutely grateful for, because yeah, it fixed all of those things, but it also reconnected us, because you and I hadn't talked in years. I forget time. Like, you know, there was
a long time.
There was either some kind of stupid drama between us or something like that. It happens with almost everybody that I've known, where I've had falling outs and pick me ups and this and that and whatever. But like, I forget how we even reconnected. I think I just found you on Twitter, or you found me.
That was pretty much it. Yeah.
But like, even then it was just loose interactions on Twitter here and there. And then finally seeing your face after like a decade, because we graduated in 2008, and then 2018. No, we didn't start this. We started this in 2020.
Was it 2020? Yeah, it was 2020.
So it's roughly, I mean, you were here for Digits, which was 2011. So it was a little less than a decade that we hadn't seen each other. Like, yeah. And to be able to reconnect with you, it was like, oh yeah, I love this dude. He's fucking awesome. Like, it's Rainwater. Yeah. Like, there's a reason why we became roommates in college. We weren't random roommates. We were ones that were like, hey, you want a room next year? And it was like one of those things where all that stuff came back, and all of the shit memories that I have from art school about not fitting in the film department and deadlines and being homesick and all that shit. That shit never even occurred to me. It was just, hey, here's the gentleman I feel simpatico with, who gets it, and I can he can level me up, and hopefully I can bring something to the table that he'll enjoy talking, like, that will aid him some. You know what I mean?
You bring a huge body. You bring a huge body of like experiences that I don't have, that I feel like are really important for me to like integrate into my life.
That's shocking to hear from me. I just want you to know that, because I feel so.
I don't really talk to that many people lately. Like,
same. That's the thing. I'm in the same bubble.
Like, I talk to people kind of off and on online and stuff, and that's all good and all, but it is different from like actually interacting with a person. You know what I mean? And like I said a couple episodes ago, like I'm all good. I'm like still, you know, there's nothing happened between me and Soko, but like we stopped that podcast. So like that's going to be another venue from which I was connecting with another person that stopped, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be talking with Soko as much, right? But like for me, like it's really it's like really helpful to have somebody that I can like weekly know, like, oh yeah, we're going to talk with each other, and we're going to catch up on stuff. And like, I feel like you're, to mirror what you're saying to a certain degree, just like having that reliable sort of place to express, like, yeah, here's my thoughts about my creative life. Cause like your creative life can be extremely lonely at times, and isolating and alienating, and people just don't get it. They don't know why you would spend your time doing that when you could, I don't know, you could be playing video games or whatever, you know? And
there's books on it, but there's no maps. Yeah. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, there's books that'll tell you about stuff, but they won't, the navigation, the journey of it, like the thought processes of how one thought rolls into another, because the conversations that we have, while they are organic in how me and you discuss things, they don't start organically. We predetermine what it is most of the time what we're going to talk about, and we fall into that topic. Whereas if we were just like, hey, Rainwater, you want to hang out this week? It's not the same. It's like, oh, well, what do you want to watch? Oh, well, what do you want to, we want to play a board game? Like, it's not like that. It's, what do we want to talk about? And to have discussions with people, with you, with the guests, with with anybody, or hopefully listeners getting stuff from it, that I've been so grateful for, because even when we were at art school, we didn't have conversations like this. And it was one of those, I don't know if it was because we all felt insecure about our experiences then because we were in school for what we were doing, but you know what I mean? Like I
didn't have a fucking clue of what I was doing until probably the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
Yeah. And
that's why the conversations are so super important now, is because it's like, oh, I'm starting to finally like kind of come awake to like what all goes into this process. Yeah. Like I had spent so much time where it was just kind of intuitive, or like, you know what it was
for me. And this was probably what people in art school now, and what we were talking about over a decade ago, was this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. But we were not talking about the how, or the what. You know what I mean? And when I say what, I don't mean like, oh, I want to make a movie. I want to make a martial arts movie. It's not like that. It's like, oh, what am I trying to do? Like, you know what I mean? And those kinds of things are the most important, because where you end up, as much as it's going to hate a lot of the control freaks out there, is not up to you. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's to some degree, it's up to you to take action, to go for things that you want. But in the end of the day, it's really not up to you. It's up to as you know, you would probably say the tarot cards or whatever like that. It's up to the chaos of the universe to decide what's going to happen to you.
Well, especially like the how of things, like how things are getting made and distributed and published nowadays is changing at such lightning speed that it's like, it is chaos, and people are figuring it out like on the fly.
Yeah.
And like,
especially because of COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And like how much technology is changing stuff. Like there's so much going on right now where I'm still waiting for things to play out, right? Like we've talked about this topic before in the past, but like we're getting really off topic, but like will NFTs change the way art is distributed, right? Like I'm like right now, I'm like, is this a stupid trend thing that's going to fade out? Or is this going to be the thing that's everything? You know what I mean?
I've been wondering the same thing, because I read people tweeting and stuff about it, and I can't tell if it's old man, and these are young people too. These are, Gen Z people. I don't know if it's old man yelling at a tree about, oh, this is so stupid. Why do I want this? I don't get why this is important. Why it's just a file. Like, who cares?
Right.
Or if that's just someone that's being resistant to change. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's very interesting to see how that's going to play out.
Here's my case. And what I've been thinking about is basically this is the solution to like a 20-year debacle that happened after like Metallica sued Napster.
Yes.
So like we basically like internet technology went off rail for like 20 years because nobody could figure out how to resolve like Metallica suing Napster again. And so now NFTs have come in so that there can be some way of validating, this is the author's authentic copy of this thing. You can't duplicate it, blah, blah, blah. So like still shenanigans could happen in the future, right?
Hacking and all that kind of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but I'm kind of looking at it like, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't just dismiss it offhand. Maybe I shouldn't take, the development of technology for granted, because let's see where it goes, And so
that's my feelings on Dogecoin. I'm still holding.
Mine too.
I'm still holding my Doge.
My thing is like, I just haven't figured out my personal use cases for this thing. And I think a lot of artists are still kind of getting wrapped up into the idea that there are people out there making outrageous amounts of money from a JPEG. Like that, I think, makes a lot of artists resentful, because they understand how much work they put into their own work. And some of them a lot of them don't. I mean, a lot of them don't do it for a living. A lot of them don't, maybe they make a little money here or there. A lot of them don't make any money. And so they see somebody who, makes art for them in their eyes, they see as like, well, I could do that, or like, what? I don't understand what the value is in this. And so they feel incredibly resentful towards this person, or this, the NFT thing or whatever, and say like, well, then this is just bullshit. Like they write it off and they become the old man yelling at the cloud.
Yeah.
Because they're not willing to like integrate this change that's happened. Also, like I was saying, it could be a trend, it could be a fad, and nobody wants to be that person who like jumped on board something and then it turns out to be like nothing.
Yeah, they made themselves the poster boy, so to speak, of that particular thing, and it failed, and then they feel like it reflects poorly on them. But you and I both know as an artist, an NFT is bullshit, because the idea of one file representing the finished piece is nonsense. Because if you open up any artist's desktop, it'll say final 1.2, final fucking file, final 12 a.m., final 12:05 a.m. There's no final file. There's about 27 of them.
Yeah.
And they all have one little thing different or something, or they were just trying to save it or whatever. I'm the old man screaming at the tree, because I feel it's important. It's important to place stock in originality and something, but I also feel like it is just marketing trying to make money off of art in a new way. Whereas, you know what I mean? Like we've talked in the past about how you feel about memes are new art. How are you going to sell an NFT of a meme? You know what I mean? Because like there's a new one made every 30 seconds, if not faster. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's no way that you can NFT that, because it's like, is it really? Because it becomes a commodity at that point.
Well, I mean, at that point, you get into talking about just like what an economy is and what currency is and all that stuff. And I mean, really, ultimately, you make a thing, somebody gives you a thing in return for that thing.
Yeah.
And so that value, right, that value has to be determined by both parties, right? You have to determine, what is this art worth to me to give it away?
Yeah.
And they have to determine, what is this art worth to me for me to give away something that I have, right? And this, I think a lot of stuff that's happening right now, particularly not just with NFTs, but the whole cryptocurrency thing, is like philosophically confronting us about how we think about how we value the stuff around us. And it's, I think, disturbing for a lot of people, because we've kind of lived with this, especially as Americans, we've lived with, and I say it this way because we have a goal, like we have a global reserve currency. We're doing good with a global reserve currency. Other countries do not have the same like prestige or privilege that we have in that sense. And it's part of the reason why we've had a stable economy for so long. So for us, we're starting to see a lot of disturbance, a lot of upheaval, because the way we're thinking about how we value things is totally being like reevaluated. So to bring it back on topic, we have to kind of have to refocus. What are the things that we have gratitude for? What are the things that we are grateful for? And think in regards to value, to how we value.
Yeah.
That's worth, because ultimately all currency is like, it's fucking numbers, right? All the dollars, all of that. Yeah, anybody can make it now. That's the crazy part, is anybody can make it now. You can make a Dogecoin, you can make a Bitcoin. You and me, we can make a spaghetti coin.
I want to make a Jow coin.
You can make a Jow coin.
I could, and I could compete with spaghetti coin. But no, I
that's
think
how easy it is now.
Yeah, see, the thing about NFTs, and not to keep this going, but I know we're way off topic, but I feel like that the thing about that, there's one thing missing, a component missing from an NFT, because I got an NFT, it came free, which right off the bat you're diminishing the worth of it.
Right.
But it came free when I bought tickets to a Backstreet Boys concert for my wife and sister. And it's a Backstreet Boys NFT. And it's like, I don't even want to call it a video file. It's more like a GIF. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck am I going to do with this? What is she going to do with this?
It just takes up space in your computer.
Correct.
Basically.
But at the same point, I have 12 Dracula Invisible Man action figures in my theater or whatever, taking up space in my basement. What is the difference between the two? And this is how I realized what the problem is with the NFTs. Collectibles, because that's basically what an NFT is. Let's be real here. An NFT is a digital collectible. Collectibles are only worth something when you can display them. Because the point of having a display is to incite a conversation, is it not? Like, to display something is to put it out there for, or to present it, I guess you should say, because a presentation would fall into the same thing, like you present a movie or whatever. But is to invite conversation, to open up theory, philosophy, opinion, praise, critique, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's what opens the door, is the visibility of it. You know what I mean? Like, allowing others to see. So to me, the problem with NFTs is, first of all, I'm a guarded person. I don't let people on my fucking phone. I don't let them on my computer. I don't let them on my laptop. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, so where am I going to display this? When they can start doing it where NFTs are displayable somehow, like on social media, like if there's a Twitter button next to your profile that shows where your NFTs are, and someone can go to your profile and click and just view your NFTs, but they can't have that NFT. Do you know what I mean? That is where value is going to start to accrue. And you know what I mean? And like, there's obviously somebody's going to be like, oh, I want that in my profile. Well, you can't. Like that exclusivity starts to come into play. And that's when you build value about it. But until they start doing stuff like that, it's kind of pointless right now.
Yeah. I'll add to that and say, before we totally finish this episode off, I'll say that I think where NFTs are going to come into actual value is in regards to 3D printing. Because you get what I'm saying with this? Because something that, like right now we're in this phase where everybody's like, oh, you just share your stuff online. You download the blueprints into your 3D printer. Yeah. But there's going to be a point where there are people who are going to want to make more money from it and be like, oh, I need to send these files off to, like, I don't know, Lockheed Martin or whatever, and they're going to 3D print this, vehicle design or whatever. The NFT technology is the way they're going to be able to do that so that it doesn't get copied and all that stuff. That's where we're going to see that, I think. And I
as
think
like a form of encryption, you mean, kind of?
Yes. As a way of also basically retaining not only secrecy, but also retaining, and I say this also in a sense of like sort of with cynicism, as a way of retaining value to something in this age of the internet where people can be like, oh, I 3D printed this, this coat, this overcoat, and it's like a Gucci overcoat. And I went onto the Gucci site and, got their blueprints to put in my, fabric 3D printer, basically. Because Gucci's got to make money off of their, 3D blueprints and not just have, some person somewhere copy the files and hack them and pirate them, whatever. So anyway, I think that's how I'm seeing how this technology will ultimately be applied 10 years from now, basically, when 3D printers become more available. And that'll be both a new aeon for art, and that'll also be a crisis.
Wrapping up, going back to being grateful, this is going to make this last 20 minutes of discussion worthwhile. I'm grateful that we as artists have grown up in the era that we have, where technology has moved forward so fast, because in no other point in history has technology advanced in such a short period of time. Because you and I were both old enough to remember when the internet first hit our houses, right? Where you had to do dial-up and this and that. but it's moved so fast from that point. Like, don't get me wrong, people in the past before then and this and that have witnessed change and growth in technology and society and so forth. They have witnessed that. We have witnessed it at a speed that they could never have imagined, right? In essence, we are different from them because we aren't going to be old men screaming at clouds as much.
As much.
Because, no, but think about it. We have become so adept to change that we embrace change quicker than they did.
For sure.
So, you know what I mean? So, like, as artists, part of being an artist, and we've talked about this all the time, we talked about this on this episode, is growing. Do you know what I mean? As growing as a human being, growing as an artist, growing. We should be thankful, and I am thankful that we've grown up when we have, because all of these changes that we're witnessing are happening so fast, and we're taking them in as skills and part of ourselves and allowing ourselves to grow. So we, as artists, can grow faster than artists in the past, than people in the past, all that kind of stuff. So I'm absolutely grateful that we are in this era and that we innately have been given this ability to progress as fast as we have, as people, as artists, not just as a society or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think that that's something to be grateful for. So, like, I think you and I, observing crypto, Dogecoin, NFTs, whatever it may be, right? We are better adept to poise ourselves in better positions in regards to these things because we're questioning things, right? We don't know which way it's going to go. We're open-minded to it. We're open to, embracing it. We're also open to the idea of the flaws that are innately built into it and all that stuff. So we are studying, we're growing with it. Whereas if I told my dad what an NFT is, he would tell me to get out of the way. I'm blocking the game. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like that, and I'm not putting down my dad or anything like that. I did that enough in this episode. Thank God my dad doesn't listen to podcasts. But the point of the matter is like, the reason that he doesn't listen to podcasts is because he wasn't growing up in an era where that kind of technology was available and how it grows. Sure. And he became the old man that he calls me to do all his tech work. And that is
something to be grateful for, is like having, like, the fact that I can talk to you from like Lake Charles, Louisiana, and you're all the way over like
New Haven, Connecticut. Yeah.
New Haven.
Oh, that's right on the line of West Haven and New Haven. You're right though.
New Haven, Connecticut. Like, that's something we wouldn't have been able to do.
Not even 10 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. Not even 10 years ago.
Not even nope. 5. Well, 5 years ago there was Skype, but nobody used it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're so, like, and as weird as it is to say this, a year and a half ago, I would have never told you I would have been on a Skype call for over an hour with anybody, let alone over 10 minutes. I would not be doing FaceTime on my phone with people. I would, you know what I mean? We were still in like texting mode then for a while. Yeah. Like, and at a while there was people like, what do you mean you don't call people anymore? I'm like, no, I just text them. Like, that's all I do. Like, and it's weird to see all these changes. We're reverting. Fucking phones are turning into flip things again. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Wait.
I'm excited about it.
Why are we going back?
I want the flip to come back.
You just like the fact that you can hang up on somebody with prejudice. All right, so let's wrap this up. We're at 90 minutes. I am thankful for you, Mr. Rainwater. I'm thankful for this podcast. I'm thankful for humility. I'm thankful for our 1 or 2 other listeners. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful to have my beautiful son. I'm thankful that my job, that my own personal business is doing well so I can support my family. Awesome. I'm thankful that my other job got closed down and I kind of got laid off. And it's weird, but man, sometimes all the pitfalls and stuff can be things to thankful for. But I can go on and on and on and on. I think you get the gist. This has been awesome. Next week we're not doing that episode. We're going to do it the week after that, I think.
All right.
The one that I think did we already spoil it for our one listener that we're doing the commentary episode?
Oh yeah, we talked about it.
Okay, so
we talked about it last
commentary episode will not be next week. It'll be the week after. And then after that, when it will be on season 2, right? Because this is episode 51.
That's right.
This is episode 51. Next episode will be 52, which will be the 1-year episode. I don't know what we're talking about yet. We'll talk about that when we hang up this call. The week after that, season 2, episode 1, we're going to try something new. And if this works, we're going to have a new podcast on our hands. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I'm interested to try. Did you have anything you wanted to wrap up about gratefulness, Mr. Rainwater?
What I was going to say is I'm super grateful for, having a supportive family. Not every family is supportive to creative people necessarily, or even give a shit about what artists want to do, Super grateful for supportive friends. Grateful for you, Jow, that you want to do this podcast every week. Grateful for our listeners, because we don't know. I'm sure people listen on Spotify.
I don't know if that's all counted when I check it through Anchor. I don't know. I don't know if they're just telling us how many people listen on Anchor, or if it's cumulative of everything.
I'm going to assume there are at least 5.
Yeah, and then we have the YouTube people too, and yeah, so who knows? We might be doing better than we know, but the point of the matter is we don't care. But we don't care how successful we are with the numbers. We do care that you're listening. Thank you very much to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you all. And I'm super grateful to my readers for Trailer Park Warlock and
your commenters. There is a difference.
That is
as
true.
We distinguished earlier. There is a difference.
There's a difference for sure. And I'm super grateful for all the opportunities that I've had, because so far it's working out better than I thought. And, it makes me excited to see what comes next. Even though it's also terrifying because I don't know what it's going to be, but, I
want to end the podcast right there. And this is the last thing I'm going to say before we say goodnight. Well, we're saying goodnight, but this is the last thing I'm going to say. You just made an absolutely fantastic quote. It's working out better than I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll see you guys next week.